the TM School. So, today we are here to recognize and celebrate not just one, but several momentous and significant achievements. First and foremost, it is today, almost today, the 5th anniversary of the TM School, which was launched on September 22nd, 2020, during the challenging times of COVID, resulting into an online or a virtual launch. You can all still remember those times. We are celebrating 15 years of partnership between UNISA and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. And we are celebrating 19 years of enriching conversation with our patron, former President Thabo Mbeki. Moreover, we are celebrating the inaugural journey of the TM School first master's and doctoral students intake for 2026. I think it deserves a round of applause. It's a long-awaited milestone for many of you present at this moment. So as we gather here today to reflect on these achievements, I am reminded of the inspiring and thought-provoking words of former President Thabo Mbeki at the launch of the Thabo Mbeki School way back then. And quote unquote, "Our job is not to turn students, our elite students, into corporate stooges, but to encourage critical thinking, to inspire, and to equip them to become quality leaders, to become instruments of change on our lovely African continent." Let us embrace these inspiring words and make it part of our daily objective and inspiration. Now, without any further ado, it is my honor to invite our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Kabula, to our podium. Please join us in welcoming her as she shares a few opening remarks. It seems there's been another change in the program. All right. So, next to me here is I'm honored to invite her and actually thanking her, Professor Pashwana, who is the acting Dean of the Thabo Mbeki School, and she is going to share with us a few welcoming remarks as well as give an overview of the journey of our school thus far. Thank you, Professor Pashwana.
Thank you, Professor Charlotte Buitendag, our head of simulation and futuristic studies at the Thabo Mbeki School. I'm not the Vice Chancellor, I'm Edith Paswana, and I'm the Dean of the Thabo Mbeki School, the acting Dean of the Thabo Mbeki School, and I'm here to give an overview. There's been a slight change on the program, and I think Prof. Charlotte did not get the message. Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, members of Council represented here by Dr. Dan Musia, members of the UNISA Management Committee, our special partners from the Thabo Mbeki Foundation Board, represented here by Mr. Max Botwana, members of the Diplomatic Corps present here, esteemed faculty, staff, alumni, students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a singular honor to welcome you all to this special event in the calendar of the Thabo Mbeki School, the Conversation. the interaction with the patron is special. It's a special occasion where our students have the opportunity to interact with the patron of the school, His Excellency President Thabo Mbeki. Today marks 14 years since we started this conversation at UNISA. And I invite you to go to YouTube, where you're going to find so many of the conversation that has happened in the past. And we are also honored to have 3 outstanding students as panelists this afternoon. And they come from different fields of study within the Thabo Mbeki School. That includes simulation and futuristic studies, public leaderships, security and intelligence studies. They will be introduced to you shortly by the moderator, and you as audience, you will also be afforded the chance to ask questions. Friends of the TM School, today we celebrate a 5-year milestone in the life of the TM School. Shall I repeat? Since its establishment, the TM School seeks to be a leading global futuristic school of excellence in public and international affairs on the African continent. And this year marks 15 years of solid partnership between UNISA and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. This strategic partnership resulted in very significant special projects and initiatives that includes the erstwhile Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute, fondly known as TIMALI, the Thabo Mbeki Presidential Library, the Africa Day Lecture, the International Women's Day, and the Conversations, which was formerly called the Interactive Session with the Patron. As a school, we wish to pause and mark these 5 years of excellence, service, and impact at the University of South Africa and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. Today, we don't simply mark the passage of time. We honor a journey of knowledge, discovery, renewal, and transformation of the African continent. When the TM School was founded on the 22nd of September 2020, under hard lockdown restriction, it was guided by a noble vision to provide accessible, world-class public sector education on the African continent, to advance research and contribute meaningfully to the development and transformation of African societies. The new school was to become the unique and influential school aimed at the renewal of Africa. So the creation of the new school at UNISA also provided an opportunity to integrate other key institutions within UNISA, specifically the Institute for African Renaissance Studies, the Institute for Dispute Resolution in Africa, the School of Governance, and the South African Democracy Education Trust, SADET. So the school started with few dedicated staff and students registered for short learning programs, continuing with the legacy of the erstwhile TIMALI. This dedicated team of academics and administration staff began their journey with courage and determination in pursuit of the clarion call of advancing the shared mission of catalyzing Africa's Renaissance, I beg your pardon. Since those humble beginnings, we have grown into one of the leading schools of public and international affairs on the African continent, and allow me to highlight a few milestones that we celebrate today. Our master's and doctoral degrees have been fully accredited by regulators. This means we now offer postgraduate programs across the 9 focus areas of the TM School. The 9 focus areas are simulation and futuristic study, security and intelligence studies, public leaderships, diplomacy and international studies, the study of government, citizenship studies, urban and rural affairs, natural resource management and sustainable livelihoods, as well as the study of government. Our short learning programs and executive education courses have increased from 6 at TIMALI to 17, offering diverse courses, including new courses such as humanitarian leaderships, the management of democratic elections, thought leadership, and many others. Our research outputs have expanded significantly with groundbreaking work in areas such as feminist, womanist society theorization, marine or maritime studies, the 4IR and digitalization, decolonial epistemic thought, democracy education, foreign policy and diplomacy, African political economy, regional integration, simulations, illicit financial flows, trade, misinvoicing, and many others. The school also hosts a reputable journal called the International Journal of African Renaissance Studies, which is published twice per annum, and it is now on track and has addressed all the backlog that was related to the COVID era. The school also hosts biannual international conference, and the inaugural conference took place in 2023, and the second one will be taking place in 2026. SADET is also a special project at the TM School, and it has increased the TM School's research outputs, including publishing The Road to Democracy in South Africa. The school also will host the UNESCO Unit Win Chair on the General History of Africa, with 12 other leading universities on the continent and in the diaspora. The postdoctoral program plays a critical role in knowledge production and have significantly increased the research outputs of our school. With regard to internationalization and partnerships at the TM School, we have established strong partnership with sister universities on the African continent and beyond, strengthening our position as a hub of knowledge exchange. The school has worked very hard to consolidate and build strong collaborations with the diplomatic community in Pretoria to facilitate global presence in the various regions of the African continent and the world. It is such strong relations, particularly with different embassies, that the school has been able to tackle topical issues relating to international relations and diplomacy, such as the shift in geopolitical power relations in the 21st century. Our large alumni network, trained to become change agents for Africa's renewal, spans the globe, influencing society as leaders in government, business, academia, and civil society. These individuals continue to fly the African Renaissance flag very high in every space they occupy. Our community engagement portfolio over the past 5 years introduced community engagement projects with impactful societal intervention in the areas of dispute resolution in the African context and traditional leadership known as Lekgotla la Batho, many of you might know from that end, cultural diplomacy through the arts and intergenerational dialogues, including the Miriam Makeba lecture, Makeba cultural diplomacy, as well as the lecture. The portfolio also contributed to the discourse and scholarship on electoral reforms and dealing with electoral disputes through the electoral dispute resolution engaged scholarship project that we do. So the land use sustainable livelihoods in the Eastern Cape is another project of the community engagement that the school does. And let me say these achievements were not accomplished in isolation. We owe a debt of gratitude to our founders, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation and UNISA. Can I request a round of applause for that? These founders laid a solid foundation to past and present leaders of these institutions who provided vision and direction, to our faculty as well, whose scholarship continues to inspire, to our staff whose dedication sustains daily operations, and to our students, who are the very heartbeat of this school. Above all, to our patron for his commitment to see the African continent fully transformed and assuming its rightful place as a global leader in the world. We also celebrate our alumni, the true ambassadors of the TM School, whose achievements around the world are a living testimony to the quality of education and values instilled here. While today we look back with pride, we also look forward with renewed commitment. As we enter the next chapter of our journey, the TM School will continue to embrace innovation, expand access, invest in cutting-edge research, and increase its rated researchers, and as well as strengthening our contribution to the African development. Our goal remains steadfast, to be a school that not only imparts knowledge, but also shapes character, nurtures creativity, and transforms society. In the long term, the school will grow in size and stature, and also consolidate and diversify its program qualification mix at postgraduate level and boost postgraduate enrollment at UNISA. To continue also in building the school, we are recruiting faculty, and we are looking for faculty that will be influential and provocative thinkers and scholars locally and internationally. And this should extend to distinguished scholars in some of the catalytic niche areas of the university, practicing professors, academic associates also linked to the school. The school has an optimistic vision to move from the current position to an environment that is fit for purpose in all its activities. The school should also add value to the academic project at the University of South Africa. As we celebrate this milestone, let us recommit ourselves to the vision that has brought us this far. May this TM School continue to stand as a beacon of hope, excellence, and transformation for generations to come. Happy birthday, the TM School.
Thank you, Professor Pashwana, for your insightful words. And congratulations to you and the TM School, and definitely also to our Vice-Chancellor and Principal, Professor Lenkabula, on this remarkable milestone. As you've heard from Professor Pashwana, it definitely has been a powerful journey thus far. I would now like to invite Mr. Nathi Mabelane, who is our SRC president, and I would like him to come to the stage to share his message of support. And I am quite sure that he will showcase the quality of leadership at UNISA and also the essence of, and this is a challenge, less is more in the allotted time.
Well, thank you very much, Program Director, His Excellency and Chancellor, President Thabo Mbeki, Chairperson of the UNISA Council, Dr. Musia, Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Pulen Lenkabula, together with the management team, distinguished guests and the students of the University of South Africa and the TM School. President Thabo Mbeki, on this momentous occasion we find ourselves in, as the burden of the world's problems is firmly ushered on our backs as we exist as part of the broader world, a world that is dangerously descending into authoritarianism, fascism, and widespread violence. From the political instability in the USA, which has become a sore spot for South Africa by threatening to cripple our economy through the imposition of the 30% tariffs, to the White House attempting to dictate South African policies, to the devastating genocide in Gaza and the silent genocides in the Sudan and the Congo. Today, President, we are proud to quote you. We are grateful for a democracy that you articulated in your critically acclaimed speech, open quote, "I am an African," close quote. This speech, President, is more than just words to us. It sparked a cultural moment that ignited a cultural revolution in our country. Open quote, our democracy is the result of the African hands and African minds, close quote. This concretely expresses the idea that Africa has never been lacking, whether ontologically, epistemologically, or politically. President Mbeki, and indeed the broader house in here, may recall that in one of the last sessions we had here, President, you implored on the South African government to ignore the raging storms in the White House and instead look into the allies we still had within the Republican Party, in order to avoid further deterioration in the relationship between South Africa and the United States. A failure to heed this call resulted in the embarrassing encounter at the White House, where the sovereignty of our nation appeared to be sold for the price of a golf course. In these turbulent times, President, we remain grateful for your steadfast figure as a statesman, President, who allows us to draw from your well of wisdom and knowledge, which provides clarity and calmness amid the noise. As the student leadership of this university, we are encouraged and recognize the strides taken to include the students in such discussions. And the true student leadership fashion, we must take this opportunity to mention the pleas of the students, President, the ever dysfunctional NSFAS that has crippled the higher education sector, the ever increasing student debt within the higher education sector. We however remain hopeful that under the leadership of one of the finest ethicists of our time, Professor and Vice Chancellor Puleng Lenkabula, who in embracing the discussions of today has always encouraged us to continue to fight for young people, in particular the students of this university. From her own words, I want to quote her: emancipatory and transformative discourses and practices rooted in justice, close quote. This understanding of ethical leadership requires us today to produce the student and the leadership collective firmly rooted in these principles. This is for us exemplified by the youth of Nepal, who in recent days rose up against the system, a system and a society that sought to exclude them. It is exemplified by the youth of Bangladesh, and in particular, the student body, whose effort ushered in a new era. These are the youth from the bedrock of resistance campaigns who have put pressure on their states and government to stand with the people of Gaza. This proactive youth, President, is a youth that sees active citizenry as a vital human experience. They seek to create structures that build the life-giving communities, and they do not depend on the state to provide superficial platforms disguised as national dialogues. Such dialogues often exclude the most affected, President, by societal challenges, adopting instead an NGO-style approach to state power. For us, as the progressive and radical youth, President, the so-called national dialogue was exactly that, merely a dialogue. As Arundhati Roy describes it, it was the NGOization of the state, the relegation of state power to the level of an NGO, a state failing to use its capacity to full for the betterment of society. For us, we do not need a national dialogue for the government to know that the people of South Africa suffer from crippling unemployment. We do not need a national dialogue for the state to know that our communities are drowning in drugs because of hopelessness and poverty and unemployment. We did not need a national dialogue to identify the societal violence through gender-based violence and the alarming violence through guns and pressing challenges. I want to conclude and say, comrades and friends, when government threatens to blacklist us through students that we must say that we cannot blacklist the future. You cannot criminalize poverty. You cannot condemn the children of the working class to economic debt for daring to seek education. If they blacklist us, then we must also blacklist their system. If they shut the doors of learning, then we must also shut down their comfort. We are the youth, we are resistance, and we must be ready to embark and go onto the streets and demand for fair and equal treatment and fair distribution of the wealth of this country. I want to thank you all. Amanda.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mabelane, especially for that honest reflection and that powerful call for constructive new direction in how we manage our country and how we incorporate the leaders of tomorrow. You are making us proud. At this point, I really want to also acknowledge the chairperson of our council, and that is Dr. Dan Mosiah, who was able to visit us today. Thank you very much for taking the trouble and for being able to be here on last minute and last notice. All right. So now it is an honor to, at long last, invite our Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Lenkabula, to introduce our Chancellor and Patron, former President Thabo Mbeki. Please give a warm hand of appreciation.
Good afternoon. Sanbonan, Molweni, Afshen, Khotong, Dumelang, Lochani, Salam alaikum. Bonjour. Ni hao. Thank you very much. I am told that I'm coming to introduce the President. I'll do both. I'll welcome you, and I'll also try my best to introduce the President. Professor, you have my tool of trade with you, Professor. It's there, down, next to the chair, on the floor. As I'm waiting for the tool of trade, thank you very much. Then I'll do both. Thank you. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you all to the University of South Africa, the home of leaders, the university at the center of shaping futures through knowledge, education, and ensuring that we create the necessary platforms for engaging one another, for imagining the future, for contesting the narratives that are not life-affirming, and for ensuring that as we engage, we dig deeper into the lifelines of knowledge, into the archives of our histories, our philosophies, our sciences, and our civilizations. But we honor also those leaders who have been in the front line, who have been at the center of fighting for the liberation, not only of South Africa, but of the continent. And I'm honored to request you to stand up and give a rousing rise of appreciation to His Excellency, President Mbeki, our Chancellor. Can I please request you? No, President, not now. You can sit, President. I'm not you, colleagues. Can I please request ululations and a round of applause for His Excellency, President Mbeki. Thank you. You may be seated. No, I didn't invite a song yet. If the young people forgot to do it, I'm not going to do it for you so that in future you do it well. I requested us to give a round of applause to His Excellency President Mbeki, not only because he's a former president of the country, but he's the Chancellor of this august university. And for us, we are privileged as the university to have a Chancellor who not only fought for the liberation of our country, but of the continent, whose works, whose advocacy, who's speaking truth to power, who's also calling us to order, has been documented in many historical books, as it has been in the multiple and varieties of documents that invite us as society to constantly reflect with one another in order to building our society for the better. And therefore, Excellency, you're welcome to the University of South Africa, and we're appreciative that you're not only our Chancellor, but you're also the alumnus of this important university. Let me recognize the Chairperson of Council of the University of South Africa, Dr. Thabo Mbeki, who's present with us, and all members of Council that are present at the university. Let us recognize the leaders of our government at local and national, who are provincial and national, who are present here at UNISA. We also recognize that there are former leaders who have traveled from different parts of the country, including yourself, former MEC Mohali, the former MEC of Economic Development and Education in the Free State. You're welcome. Your Excellencies, ambassadors and high commissioners representing various countries to South Africa, Ambassador Willie Lenhlapo, former ambassador of South Africa to the United Nations and a resident ambassador at the University of South Africa. Let me recognize members of MENCOM who are all here in this gathering, and especially the host amongst the MENCOM, Dr. Chivasi, Professor Mahanu, Dr. Molapo, Me Nakene, Datem Tebele, Professor Seputa, and Professor Mwepe. I did not see you, but I saw you. Yeah, he's behind. Let me also recognize Date Seth Palazzi and all members of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the board, Mr. Max Botwana, the Chief Executive Office of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Professor Peter Ndach, thank you very much for the work that you're doing alongside with Professor Msila, who will be participating in the program. Representative of the SRC already having shared some of their views. Current and former students at the Thabo Mbeki school. I was going to say Timali because I'm one of those who started with Timali, the older ones, not the 5-year-old. So forgive me if I have this tongue twister. So both the TM school and Timali, because we recognize the journey. Representatives of various media houses present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, academics, administrative staff, and professional staff of the University of South Africa. Welcome you all to this second and final installation in this year of the Conversations with the President, the patron of the Thabo Mbeki School, His Excellency President Mbeki, for the academic year 2025. It is always a privilege and pleasure to witness the vibrancy and the growth of this crucial deliberative platform at the TM School and the University of South Africa, where our students have the opportunity that many do not have to engage with primary sources, not secondary, not tertiary sources. By learning directly from the experiences in the ideation of our patron and the former president, who would have gone on to the world to negotiate for this country as it was for the continent, and in his sharing and reflections around those experiences and their implications for today. But it is also important that as we reflect and celebrate the 15 or 16 years of journey with His Excellency President Mbeki, as well as the 5 years of the commemoration of the school, that we also cast our eyes back as we imagine forward, like the Sankofa, that the Ghanaians remind us that you look back as you forge forward, so that you are able to draw on the lessons of the past as you frame the future that you would like to anchor for yourself. The second installation does not only take place at a time when we celebrate our heritage in the country, but when there are tectonic challenges that the world is facing, that our country is facing, that require thought leadership. It is at a time where major upheavals and unprecedented social, political, and economic developments locally and globally are challenging us and require bold intellectual engagement, rigor, as well as imagination of the solutions of the future. Some of the macro trends at local and global levels that affect us include amongst the following, and not necessarily all of them. Major geopolitical shifts which redefine the global balance of power with massive implications for the global governance and systems, as well as multilateral relationships. An ongoing genocide in Palestine, Gaza, the war in Ukraine, and other conflicts situation in the DRC, in Sudan, all of which put a strain on human life and on multilateral systems. Equally true, there are many other issues in the global commons, such as the climate change that we are contending with, the ecological degradation that majority of countries are facing, the pandemics that keep challenging human ingenuity and that will survive and succeed in a rapidly changing world which requires strong science, strong scholarship, and strong institutions. In the home front, we continue to see our democratic project struggling with both basic and strategic questions more than 30 years, requiring us to looking at the lessons we would have garnered in this journey and how they have to enable our country to extricating ourselves from the challenges. We have just emerged from the historic general election that has probably changed our country. I'm not sure if it's forever or if it's a temporary feature of our society. We have also a national effort underway to ensure that South Africa we want becomes an engagement process that our society, the continent, and the world, especially those who have progressive futures, are attentive to. We continue to face the challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, all of which contribute to the social fissures that our society are grappling with. These and many other issues require us to think and act boldly and innovatively for our country and the continent to surviving, if not to extricating themselves from these grand questions. The moment is always now, not tomorrow. And all of us, therefore, have to hold hands and contribute to the building of our society as we do of our continent, including of our university. As a University of South Africa, we are encouraged to see that our TM school students, the youth of the country, are deeply concerned and engaged in the struggles and platforms to change our national fortunes as they are our continental fortunes through education and the contribution that you make in the diverse spaces that you inhabit. We are also equally excited, His Excellency President Mbeki, that the journey with the TM Foundation has yielded multiple benefits, assets, opportunities, empowerment of our society. In particular, we're very elated that the TM School has been accredited by the Council on Higher Education and SAQA to offer master's and doctoral degrees, and I think we require a round of applause. But as we look into the journey, President, we're quite heartwarmed that our partnership with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation has yielded strong digitization systems for the history of this country, including the Presidential Library. And therefore, we did not just finish with the library that you would have made available for the University of South Africa. We're quite appreciative that the many digital libraries have been created precisely because of your invitation that we should pay attention to libraries and their roles for society and our imagination. Equally important, we are quite appreciative that as a university, we've been able to providing the platforms that allow youth and young adults in our society not just to wallow in their digital platforms for entertainment, but for nation and continental building, and as such, invited by your robust intellectual rigor and engagement, not just as an intellectual, but also as a leader and a former leader of a country. We are also encouraged, President, and all of you colleagues, that the school has not just been theorizing about what has to be done, what ought to be done, and how should it be done with UNISA and with other collaborative environments. We are appreciative, President Mbeki, that you have not just allowed us, as the University of South Africa or STM, to be the only beneficiaries of your legacy. Just in May, colleagues, we were in Tanzania, where robust engagements by Tanzanians and all other colleagues who came to pay respect, homage, appreciation to the work that the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the University of South Africa have been doing through the TM School have been doing. And we're quite appreciative that, in the words of the Tanzanians, this is an important partnership that ensures that our leaders, that we drink, in the words of Audre Lorde, from our own wells, that we are not confused and do not allow others to create narratives around the futures we need to craft, but we're equally the participants and the agents of that change through knowledge, and therefore we are appreciative. We hope that today, at this session, the conversations with the President will be robust, that we will get the voices, the insights, and the ideas that will take us forward as a country, that we will together, in the spirit of this year's thematic appeal and a call to action of the University of South Africa, that we will reclaim Africa's futures together. And with these words, you are please feel welcome. Please don't silence your voice. Please ensure that you engage robustly and yet with respect and dignity. For this is an event where we engage to strengthen ourselves, to strengthen our democracy, to strengthen the dreams for the future of this country whilst learning together from our forebears, the leaders who continue to make themselves available to teaching. Mzee Mbeki, Dr. Mbeki, was born on June 18 in the Eastern Cape. They said I should read it, President. It's an instruction. I heard you, but I'll shorten it. They said for those who might have forgotten to do their research, we should help them. And President joined the African National Congress Youth League in 1956 at the age of 13, quite irritated by injustice, wanting to ensure that this country and his region realized and affirmed the dignity of all humanity. He also ensured that in his advocacy for the dignity of all people in the country, in the continent, that he continued his studies with this beautiful university, the University of South Africa, where he is an alumnus, and we're quite proud that you studied with UNISA. And President went on to ensure that he consistently continues his studies, and he read economics at Sussex University in the United Kingdom, where he really worked on the economy as an important paradigm of our emancipatory participation or thinking or transformation. And we are quite appreciative that in that journey, President Mbeki met and married Mayor Zanele Mbeki, and who is also an illustrious leader that has gone on to ensure that the empowerment of women, especially the participation of women in the economy, is a central feature of our society. President Mbeki is currently the chairperson of the African Union High-Level Implementation Panel for Sudan and South Sudan, the chairperson of the African Union High Panel on Security of the Horn of Africa, and the African Union and UN United Nations High-Level Panel on illicit financial outflows from Africa. In addition, President Mbeki is the chairperson of the board of the South Center, a think tank of the countries of the Global South, whose work and office are based in Geneva, Switzerland. President Mbeki has facilitated multiple peace negotiations in various African countries, including Zimbabwe, Burundi, Lesotho, Comoros, Cote d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, and many more. Peace, justice, freedom, democracy, and humanizing philosophy have been the hallmark of the work, the leadership, the presidency, and the patronage of President Mbeki, even at UNISA as the Chancellor and the patron of the TM School. President Mbeki, we are honored and privileged to invite you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The highlight of today. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep standing till the President has taken his seat. Thank you. You may be seated. I would like to use this opportunity also to recognize the chair of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, who has been able to join us, albeit online. So now I would like to introduce invite Professor Msila, who is going to chair and to moderate the next session, and who will be able to introduce our esteemed students and to guide us through this interactive session. Professor Msila.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for guiding us in this program so well. Ladies and gentlemen, my job is a small job. I'll just have to call my panelists to come to the front. Ms. Seipati Mokema, Ms. Omolemo Morokwe, Ms. Rachel Malupe. They are continuing with the tradition of the school, where our students, as intellectuals, show why we say we stand on the shoulders of or on the shoulders of those who came before us. The students, the panelists here, show that tradition. They reflect that tradition. Because as a school, we want to show why we want relevant education in our school. Relevance because it is critical. Relevance because we want intellectuals who can be able to apply the knowledge that they are learning from our school. That is why we promote critical learning amongst our students. You know, from decades ago, we've heard of various people who have spoken about the need for relevant education in Africa. In 1960, for instance, Julius Nyerere stated that whilst other people are talking about going to the moon, his country will go to the villages to see how they can improve the lives of the people in the villages. Kaunda KK talked about African humanism. And later, Nyerere again, he talked about the importance of communityhood in society. So the three panelists are continuing in that tradition. And I will start with Ms. Seipati Mokema. Ms. Seipati Mokema is a scholar and a researcher. She attained her bachelor's degree in development studies in 2015, followed by honors 2016 and master's degree in sociology in 2021. Her work as a researcher and scholar have been in areas of education and employment reforms, economic development, and sustainable livelihoods in Southern African countries, African youth development programs, as well as South African student protest movements. Seipati currently works as a researcher in the Gender, Equality, and Social Inclusion group at the International Water Management Institute, Pretoria office. Ms. Mokema has recently completed an advanced course in thought leadership for Africa's renewal at the TM School. She passed the course with distinction. Over to you, Ms. Mokema.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Msila, for the introduction and for the honor and privilege of being invited to be part of this conversation. Firstly, let me greet His Excellency, former President Thabo Mbeki, the Chancellor of the University of South Africa and patron of the TM School. I also greet Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, the Acting Executive Dean of the TM School, Professor Edith Paswana, and all the Vice Principals and Executive Management Committee of the TM School. Mr. President, brain drain has undermined Africa's economic growth. For more than 5 decades, skilled and youthful Africans have been leaving the continent for Europe, North America, and Asia in search of better economic and educational opportunities, leaving a gap in essential skills and talent needed to develop the continent's economic and social prosperity. Africa's youth amounts to more than 500 million persons aged between 15 and 35 years. From this population, 292 million persons are employed and skilled professionals. And this number is expected to increase to 450 million persons by the year 2035. To not discredit the efforts of the African Union, frameworks such as the African Youth Charter, the Malabo Declaration, Youth Decade Plan of Action, and quite recently, Agenda 2063, have been established and executed, but they seem to be inadequate in retaining homegrown talent. Also, to give credit to young Africans across the continent, they have transformed their respective countries through radical movements such as the Arab Spring of 2012 and the Fees Must Fall student movement of 2015. Young Africans have also dominated global culture through music and fine arts, and they have led various technological innovations that address environmental and health challenges. The core issue here is therefore not a youth capability or skills issue, but rather a structural failure of African institutions to harness the continent's youth demographic dividend. So my question to you, Mr. President, is, as an experienced African leader, what is your view on structural and governance failures that has accelerated brain drain? And what concrete actions are being taken to create environments that can retain our skilled youth for Africa's transformation? In addition to this, how can we leverage thought leadership from our skilled diaspora and our domestic youth as catalysts for the African Renaissance and the Rehumanization Project? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Seipati Mokema. Thank you. Our next panelist is Ms. Omolemo Awobakwe Moroke. Ms. Omolome Awobakwe Moroke is an aspiring governance and international relations professional with academic background in political studies and international relations. She holds a Bachelor of Social Sciences and an honors degree in political studies. She is currently on an internship program with the IEC, where she supports the implementation of governance-related projects with the Commission. Ms. Omolemo Moroke is registered in the TM School for the Advanced Program in Simulations and Analysis for Public and International Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Msila, for the introduction and for the invitation to speak today. Let me also take this opportunity to greet His Excellency, former President Thabo Mbeki, the Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, Acting Executive Dean of the TM School, Professor Edith Paswana, and all the VPs and Executive Management Committee of the Thabo Mbeki School present today. Your Excellency, when we look at Africa's future, one striking reality is the demographic shift that is underway. According to the Berlin Institute for Population and Development, Africa has the fastest growing population in the world, and it is expected to reach about 2.5 billion by 2050. Now, with 2.5 billion people, even if Africa whispers, the world will still hear us. And this is not just a statistic. It indicates that Africa will have the largest workforce, the biggest consumer base, and potentially the strongest influence on the global stage. Demography alone suggests that Africa cannot remain on the outskirts of international affairs. At the same time, the global order is shifting. Recently, President Xi Jinping of China, President Putin of Russia, and North Korea's Kim Jong-un met in China to celebrate the 80th anniversary since China's victory over Japan in World War II, and to strengthen their strategic coordination. Now, I believe that this meeting amongst these powerful allies has the potential to start something that can change the world order from the hands of the US and the Bretton Woods institutions to a more multipolar world. This shows that the future of global governance may no longer be unipolar, but contested with different centers of power. Now, in this context, I think that Africa faces both an opportunity and a challenge. The opportunity being to leverage its demographic and resource advantages to be a real player in shaping global politics. And the challenge, on the other hand, will be avoiding being caught between competing world powers. My question to you, Your Excellency, is how should Africa, and South Africa in particular, position itself within this evolving world order? And what concrete role can the African Union play in ensuring that Africa is not just an observer, but an active shaper of global governance, especially by leveraging its growing demographic power in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Omolemo. The last speaker is Ms. Rachel Malupe. Rachel, we have to say thank you for coming here. We understand you had an unfortunate incident this afternoon, but you made sure you do come and present yourself here. This is how committed you were to make sure that you make this possible. Ms. Rachel Malupe began her professional journey by studying travel and tourism. This led to a successful career in the airline industry, where she gained invaluable experience and a deep appreciation for South Africa and Africa as a continent. After several years in aviation, she transitioned into full-time studies, earning a diploma in public relations and later a BCom in marketing management. Professionally, she served at the Pan-African Parliament as Protocol and Administration Officer, where she was actively involved in high-level institutional processes. In her current role in a diplomatic office, she provides executive support and managing diplomatic protocol engagements. She is passionate about diplomacy and governance. Ms. Rachel Malupe completed an advanced course in diplomacy studies and an advanced course in intelligence management at the TM School. She passed both advanced courses with distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Malupe. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When I said to my dad, I'm studying intelligence, he asked me with great concern, "My child, does that mean you are a spy?" Thank you, Professor Msila, for the opportunity. Greetings to former President, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, our Chancellor of the University of South Africa and patron of TM School, the Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkapola, the Acting Executive Dean of TM, Professor Edith Paswana, all VPs and Executive Management Committee of the TM present, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed. Good afternoon. Mr. President, the issue of peace and security remains one of the critical pillars for the prosperity of our nation. The UN SDG 16 addresses peace and security with the title Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. The absence of peace creates conditions of instability, lack of economic development, and diminishes the prospects of prosperity. Nations in conflict cannot grow or does not have a chance as resources that should be invested in development. Instead, it's diverted to address instability and conflict. In the midst of these challenges, we require leaders who understand the significance of principled and visionary leaders. With that in mind, Mr. President, my first question to you, in your view, what is it that African leaders must do decisively, dramatically, or drastically to eliminate conflict on the continent in order to foster peace, security, and sustainable economic development? Secondly, Mr. President, I had the pleasure of attending the second annual dialogue in Mount Grace. And I would like to raise an issue that has generated much concern. I think I'm not only asking for myself. I'm asking for South Africa as a whole. South Africa has recently suffered the tragic loss of the SNDF personnel who participated in a SADC mission in the DRC. Families of these personnel, Mr. President, are still in mourning, and so is South Africa. Yet during the recent second annual dialogue in peace and security held in Mount Grace, representatives of the M23s were present, this being the very group implicated in those tragic events. With this in mind, Your Excellency, my question to you is, could you please clarify to my fellow South Africans the purpose and the intentions behind engaging the M23? Was this a step towards facilitating dialogue in peace and peace building in the region? How do you respond to the concern raised, bearing in mind that our intelligence and national security is under a lot of scrutiny? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for your presentation. You know, earlier the VC, the principal of the university, spoke about the primary sources, the use of primary sources. And we are really so thrilled, so fortunate to have the giants whose shoulders we are standing on. So I'll give over to you, Mr. President, to respond to the questions of our panelists. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Msila. First of all, I think we should apologize for our late start. And the reason for that is the South African Police Service are always concerned about matters of safety and security which affect all of us. That's why they then set up these things to check what we are carrying. So like me, I've got to go through to make sure that I'm not carrying a gun or a knife or something. That's what delays our start. The Vice Chancellor was saying to me that we make a small mistake with regard to these sessions, that we don't alert people on time that they should come an hour early, because they are going to be delayed necessarily because of the checkup. As a consequence of which, people arrive 10 minutes before time and then will then spend 20 minutes in the queue. I want to apologize for that. It really was because of the security measures which the police service undertake. That necessarily means we will cut the time for the question and answer session. Necessarily. I must thank the panelists, Professor Msila, for these difficult questions they have posed, all of which they relate basically to our continent, all of them. You know, as the first modern African intellectuals, modern ones, emerged in the 19th century, they took up this matter about the future of all Africans on the continent and the African diaspora. I'm mentioning that to say that therefore many of us, I see all sorts of people like with gray hair like Machila and others. As we grew up within this context that our people from, as I say, from the 19th century onwards, have always had a Pan-African perspective. So it's a preoccupation not only about South Africa, but all Africans on the continent and elsewhere. So I'm mentioning that I think we should bear this in mind, that historically this has been the position in our country. That even the liberation movement, historically, the liberation movement has been Pan-Africanist in outlook. It could not but be Pan-Africanist in outlook. That's where we come from. You remember even when the African priests broke away to form their own Christian churches in the 19th century. They called it the Ethiopian Church. It was again within this context of, as these Africans in South Africa, we already always had this perspective that our future of South Africa was intimately tied up with the future of the rest of the continent, as well as the African diaspora. I'm mentioning that in connection with the issue that Omulemu raised about the world order and Africa's role in that context. The role of South Africa, the role of the African Union, and so on. To start off by saying, a part of what's happened, I'm sure that the students here would have observed what I'm about to say, which is this, that over the last few years, as a country, we have walked away from the Africa agenda. That's a reality. Over the years, the focus on the continent and the placement of South Africa within that context has diminished. I know this also because when I go around the African continent, other Africans raise this question. What has happened to South Africa? Why are you walking away from the rest of us? That's part of our reality. So the question that Omulemu is raising, what does South Africa do in terms of responding to this world order that is emerging? In a sense, it's an unfair question. Because, as I've said, as a country, we've been walking away even from focus on these Africa questions. Never mind the rest of the world. I think the students also at this university of this African school would also have noticed another phenomenon, which is that the spirit of Pan-Africanism on the continent has also been retreating. You see it everywhere. Not only in South Africa, but elsewhere in the world, elsewhere on our continent. That spirit of Pan-Africanism is also diminishing. And in a sense, one can understand it. Each one of our countries individually gets preoccupied with its own domestic challenges. What happens to the rest of the continent, what happens to this Pan-African perspective, recedes. So, Omulemu, you are quite correct. There's something that is happening in the rest of the world which signifies a changing world order. At the beginning of this year, the Secretary of State, United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, gave an interview, an interesting interview, in which he said there was a particular period when you had a unipolar world in which United States was a dominant pole, a unipolar world. And he said that period was an aberration. When I read that thing, I stood up and gave Marco Rubio a standing ovation. That you'd get a leader of the United States to say, the unipolar world is, let's not go back there. A world dominated by the United States. And then he went on to say, what is normal is the practice of multipolarity. Again, I gave another standing ovation. That the United States would take a position of that kind. And then he said, in the context of that multipolarity, each of the countries of the world pursues its own interests, does whatever in the rest of the world in pursuit of its own interests. And he said, I remember he mentioned Chile. He said Chile pursues its own interests, as does China, as does Russia. And he said, within that multipolar world, therefore, the United States will pursue its own interests. That's when I sat down. I didn't give that a standing ovation. Because it was signaling something about what was going to happen. Since everybody in the world pursues their own interests, why should the United States not pursue its own interests? I thought what was missing in what actually had been a correct position taken by Secretary of State Rubio was to say, we pursue, each one of those countries pursues our own interest within the context of a particular global setting. That all of us, for instance, are bound by what is in the UN Charter. Yes, indeed, we might very well pursue that our own interests as countries. But there's a global context that was missing. It explains the way that the United States has acted. Consistent with that position, therefore, we will, like all other countries, pursue our own interests. That is why then you've had this demand, very visible, very loud, very correct, insisting on these three things: multipolarity, multilateralism, and respect for the UN Charter. You've had this demand made. This is part of this formation of this world order. That yes, indeed, as each one of our countries must pursue these interests, at least let's be guided by these three things. Respect for multipolarity, multilateralism, particularly exercised through the United Nations, and respect for the UN Charter when we talk about international law. There's clearly a battle that is going on in the world around these issues. That's why even the mention about this celebration in China, now last week, of the defeat of the Japanese aggression during the Second World War, the 80th anniversary, and what happened in Beijing to celebrate that. Again, people watch the pictures. Did you see that picture? With Xi Jinping and Putin and Kim Jong-un. It's part of this discussion. It signifies something. Or a bit earlier, when the Shanghai Cooperation Organization met, again they would say, did you see that picture? Xi Jinping, Putin, and the Prime Minister of India. The situation, I would say, with regard to Africa, South Africa, the AU, with regard to what interventions do we make in order to make sure that that emerging global international order addresses the African interests. I can tell you what I think we should do. But I think looking at the objective reality in this country, on our continent, I think we are at our weakest in terms of making this kind of intervention. The sense of cohesion that you need, for instance, on the African continent to say, if you said, let the Africans come together and say to them, in this discussion about multilateralism, where do we stand? I think you would find countries moving in different directions. I've told this story before, maybe even here. That some years back I visited one of the African countries. I was still president then. And then when I was leaving, I was accompanied in the car by one of the ministers. So we're chatting away there in the car and so on. And then he gave me his business card and said, President, next time you come to visit us, I would like you to contact me so that we can continue with this very interesting discussion we're having among ourselves, between the two of us. So this is my business card with my contact details. So I took the card, put it in my pocket, and off we went. And as we were flying, I took the card out and looked at it. On one side, it had his name, minister, and contact details, telephone number, and all of that. And I looked the other side of the card. It had the same details. Name, minister, contact details in Paris. On this side of the card are the contact details in his own home in Africa. On the other side are his contact details in Paris. So, and the man was not ashamed to give me a card like that. But I'm trying to say that sense of cohesion among our continent, which would enable us to intervene in the making of this new world order, I think is not there. And I think an unfortunate part of that is, as I was saying earlier, as a country, we've walked away from the African agenda ourselves. So the capacity to intervene with the rest of the continent to answer the question that Omulemu we are raising, capacity isn't there. From here, to say, let us get together as Africans and play the role that we need to play in this emerging new world order. What is to be done about that? I'm saying I can tell you what I think. But I think objectively it might be entirely irrelevant. Because I think we need to do something else first. To reinstitute, for instance, the Africa agenda here in South Africa. To re-engage the African continent about itself. Before we begin to answer the question, what do we do about the rest of the world? And those I think should be our starting points. The question that, Rachel, you are raising about the Congo is related to the same issue. You know, the conflict in the Congo, I'm talking now particularly about the Eastern Congo, that conflict has been going on now for a number of years. Very difficult to resolve this issue. You are right, I saw that recently there's been some controversy because the Thabo Mbeki Foundation held we now have an annual session on this question of peace and security on the continent. It was the second session now, last week, focused on the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, the Congo, and Southern Africa, particularly focusing on Mozambique. I'm saying that I've seen questions being raised about the presence of a delegation from the M23 in the Congo. It puzzled me that the question arose at all. Because you can't discuss peace and security in the Congo without involving the M23. Otherwise you are joking. That is why you have a process taking place in Doha, in Qatar, where the government of the Congo and the M23 are meeting. Necessarily it's correct. And before that, the president of Angola, the current chairperson of the African Union, had chaired a process, exactly the same process, of a dialogue between the government of the Congo and the M23 in order to find peace in the Congo. I think the Thabo Mbeki Foundation had been very, very foolish if it had invited all these Congolese to say, let's talk about peace and security in the Congo, but you M23 stay away. It doesn't make sense. It would never make sense. Because even to understand the phenomenon of the M23, where does this thing come from? It's very, very fundamental to understand that, because that helps you to understand the Congo. If you don't understand the origins of the M23 and what it stands for, then you will not understand the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I'm saying that as a foundation, we thought that let us discuss in the matter of the DRC, because clearly this is one of the major areas in terms of peace and security on the continent. And let everybody come. The consequence of which, not only did they have the M23 there, you had representatives of the governing party. President Tshisekedi's party representatives were there. And quite correctly, they never questioned the presence of the M23. They are Congolese. They all know the nature of the challenge in the Congo. So I'm saying President Tshisekedi's party, the UDPS, had its representatives there, and they addressed the meeting, made their own proposals as to what is to be done. The M23, the Alliance of the Congo River, the AFC, were also there. They addressed the meeting and said, this is what we think about the Congo. And I think I can say this, that in the end, we had a meeting with all of these delegations. And the very, very interesting thing was this. There was a unanimous view, from the governing party to the M23 and others in between. All of them saying, it's very clear to us as the Congolese that we need a national dialogue. We need to get together as the Congolese and say, what do we do about the Congo? That is a unanimous view. That includes the M23. I'm saying it includes the governing party of the Congo of President Tshisekedi. And hopefully that will happen. That the Congolese will again get, they call it the Sun City number 2. They say, President, we met here at Sun City to talk about the future of the Congo and agreed. All of us. And as a consequence of which we took the agreement at Sun City and drafted a constitution on which all of us agreed. The problem, they say, is that in the implementation of the Sun City agreement, we didn't implement various elements of that agreement. That's why we have a crisis today. We need another Sun City number 2 so that we as Congolese can then talk together and say, what do we do about our country? I'm saying, Rachel, you could never talk about peace and security in the Congo and exclude the M23. If you did that, it would mean you have not understood the nature of the challenge of peace and security in the Congo. We were doing nothing else different from what President of Angola did and what the Rwandans, the Qataris are doing in terms of putting together a grouping of this kind. The matter of peace and security on the continent, more broadly, I think is very related to the issue I was talking about earlier, of this retreat of the Pan-African spirit on the continent. I think this broader question about peace and security on the continent relates to that. You know what happens normally? A conflict breaks out somewhere. Then we intervene and say, stop the guns, silence the guns. These guns are then silenced. The belligerents then talk to each other. We produce a new constitution, hold elections. We have an interim government, hold elections on the basis of the new constitution, and that's peace. So it normally happens. And what's missing in that process is an intervention to address the root causes of the conflict. So it's necessary to silence the guns. And so it's necessary to find a formula so that people can govern their country. But of critical importance is this question. What is it that led to this conflict? We have to address that so that it does not arise again. And indeed, this was one of the hot issues as we're discussing now, peace and security with regard to Mozambique. What is happening in Cabo Delgado? Who are these people? What do they stand for? Whom do they represent? What do they want? Because you need to understand that not only to say silence the guns, but in order to address the issue which gave birth to that grouping so that it does not arise again. I'm saying the challenge about that is the politics of the continent. It becomes difficult to get to this matter of the root causes in the absence of a Pan-African outlook. You can't do it in the absence of that Pan-African outlook. If, for instance, at the root of the conflict might be, for instance, issues of ethnic power. To say this particular grouping is too dominant, and therefore there's maldistribution of resources and all that. And therefore, to get to the root causes, we must look at this matter. For instance, it's called unity in diversity. How do we address this unity in diversity? Address both issues at the same time. It's a very political question. It's not mechanical. And I'm saying that it needs a political base from which you are able to arrive at a situation like that. If you don't have it, you will avoid addressing these fundamental questions. And I'm saying that on the continent, this is part of our problem, that weakness of a Pan-African perspective. It impacts negatively on the capacity of the continent to deal with these problems of peace and security. So that's one of the matters that we need to address. And indeed, I think that the more the continent would succeed in kind of developing this cohesion within itself and about its own future, the easier it would be to address the matter about the brain drain. Many years ago, I visited the United States. Our then ambassador says to me, President, there's a group of Africans here who want to see you. So I saw them. This is a group of Africans. It was a very interesting group. All of them had PhDs. All of them. And all of them had got those PhDs in what the Americans call the Ivy League universities. And all of them were under 40. And this was executive of that organization. That organized themselves across the United States as Africans. All of them PhDs, all of them from these universities. And this is the executive committee that I met in Washington. So they say to me, President, this is who we are. This is this body. So I protested. Professor Msila to them immediately. Because I said, you see, the way you people have constituted yourselves, it means I can't belong. I was excluded. But these Africans were saying, President, we're qualified as we are, we're working in the US, but we remain African. Let's look for a mechanism whereby we'll spend some of our time here in the US and spend time in Africa, so that our capacities make an impact on the development of our continent. We agreed on the matter with them, and actually NEPAD then ran a program, because they've got qualifications in all sorts of things, mathematics and this and that and the other, to talk around the continent to say, during the 3 months of the year, we can bring so-and-so to come and work in this sector. Matter was agreed, it became program of NEPAD. It's disappeared. Again, for the same reason I was indicating earlier, the capacity on the continent has weakened. I'm absolutely certain that up to today, there's that willingness among these Africans who are in the diaspora like that, these ones who are represented as being part of the brain drain. I'm absolutely certain that if the continent reached out to them to say, look, you can see where the continent is moving this way, they would repeat the same thing. We may not return from the United States, but we're ready to spend months on our continent to give necessary contribution. It's possible to deal with the matter of the brain drain, but the challenge starts here. It does not start in America, it starts here. To get the continent right so that we can then do the right thing. And I think that you are quite correct, Sipati, about the existence of many policies on the African continent with regard to the youth. There's no shortage of policies, even at the continental level, on the issue of youth challenge and youth development. Again, you'll come back to this problem. The right policy positions have been taken, they exist. The will to implement is not there. With regard to a whole range of issues on the African continent, it's the absence of the will to do the right things, which have been agreed already. Issues of youth development, for instance. So I would really be very, very happy, Professor Msila, if your school can then say we're answering the questions that arise from all of this. What then do we do? Me having said this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, we can't stop there. What we have to say, what is it then that we do in order to get things right? And this African school, that is its task. And I really hope that we would focus on the matter like that. Because just to end on this point, I'm told that even some members of the diplomatic corps here in the last few weeks have met informally and raised the same question. To say, why doesn't this school serve as a center in terms of other African academic institutions to answer these questions? Why don't we do that? I think it's a challenge that faces all of us. And so there's none of us, I can see here, a number of our former ambassadors, Kingsley Makubela is sitting here, and others I've mentioned, Another one with gray hair. Even highly educated here, like Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. A lot of capacity there is to answer these questions. Because I'm saying we should not only say this is what is wrong, we must also say what is to be done. And the school must do that. I think I've answered all of these questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just before we continue with the questions, I would like to relay the message from the panelists who said to me that I should relay the message that they are so thankful to be part of this panel today, and I should give their thanks to the VC and His Excellency, the President, our Dean, Professor Paswana, as well as the Council. So thank you on behalf of the panelists. Mr. President, also thank you for the homework that you have given us as a school, that we need to look at some of the questions that you raised. I think we'll take that as a challenge as a school. I'm sure our team is ready to take up the challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, now the session that we're getting into will be to ask you as the audience some questions. And for the first round, I'll take only 6 questions. 2 from this side, 2 from this side, and 2 from that end. Please, when you ask a question, don't start by giving a speech. Just get on to the question immediately. Because sometimes you'll find that we get carried away by wanting to talk about 15 minutes before asking the question. Okay, just be direct and ask the question. We'll have the first one here. We'll have another one there, the cap. We'll have one there, green jersey. We'll have the one there. We have one there, in that order. Oh, we'll come back.
Okay. No, thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mduduzi Michael Majola, and I would like to pose a question to the former state president. It has to do with the national dialogue. We've noted that his foundation, along with other 6 legacy organizations, withdrew from the national dialogue's preparatory, citing concerns over rushed timelines and reduce citizens' role, feeling the process meaning the government wants to take influence in that process. What are your views on the national dialogue's current trajectory, and how do we believe it can be made more inclusive and effective in addressing South Africa's challenges? And the other question, quick one, President, is going to speak about Donald Trump, the US president. How do you assess Donald Trump's comments and policies regarding the white farmers, including the proposed tariff that is going to be imposed with South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. That is the first question. Panelists, can you are released. Thanks. Okay, that is the first question. The second question? It was somewhere. Oh, okay.